Global Transformation Astrology, GTA, with William Stickevers.
What we recently seen just the other day, actually over the past 2 weeks, right? Since the eclipse in the past 2 weeks, Ukraine has taken credit for at least two separate strikes on peculiar targets. So these Russian targets were over the horizon radar stations using drones with an impressive flight range of at least 1,200 miles. The Ukrainians supposedly defied NATO restrictions not once, but twice to target radar systems that have nothing to do with them, nothing to do with fighting the war in Ukraine. So if we acknowledge the fundamental truth that Ukraine serves merely a proxy battleground between Russia and the United States via NATO, one could argue then that World War III has already commenced. And here's why. The powers that be have been content to keep the conflict primarily contained within eastern Ukraine or within Ukraine's border. However, recent developments suggest that this situation may be on the verge of escalation. There are unsettling activities occurring on the nuclear front between NATO and Russia, leading to a plausible consideration that a false flag operation might be imminent between now and the November election. So, let me explain what happened first. Let's just take a look at the eclipse. If we look at the Russian horoscope in the center here for the Russian Federation, note that eclipse is making a direct hit right on Russia's Uranus-Neptune conjunction. So Russia is getting directly eclipsed. So I'm going to talk about what that means in a moment. So what we saw is the Voronezh M radar station, which is the station that determines if nuclear weapons are incoming. Remember I talked about the ninth house as being the sensors where a country can inform its leadership, hey, we see missiles being fired from a continent away. We see the missiles are inbound. We see what the naval deployment status of a enemy nation is. So basically the eyes and ears outside of the country's boundaries. So when you saw that eclipse in that geodetic ninth house for Russia, it basically showed that that was certainly going to be an issue. So when Ukraine struck this type of radar system, so this is the radar system here, this M radar system basically determines if nuclear missiles are coming, where they're coming from, and based on that information, whether we should strike or this is a rogue missile or this missile is not on trajectory to hit Russia. If a missile is fired from Syria, this system will inform the powers that be in the Kremlin what the status is the missile a threat, should we counterstrike, that entire protocol that gets executed. So basically, Ukraine struck these two different, on separate days, these systems. So it's important to understand that a strike of this kind deep into the center of Russia requires complex planning and logistics. It cannot be achieved without covert intel on the ground, as well as aid from satellite surveillance. Ukraine relies completely on NATO satellites and intel. No such strike would ever be possible without NATO involvement. That was greenlighted by Washington. Furthermore, the drones used would need to have the ability to evade early detection systems and remain hidden for thousands of miles deep into enemy territory that can deliver a high-powered precision strike. This kind of technology comes from the United States. Yes, the British also have drones, very sophisticated ones. By the way, most of their drone training and technology sharing occurs at Area 51. I just happen to know this because my British neighbor worked in the drone program and said, oh yeah, basically the majority of the British drone program goes on in Area 51. So it's basically US technology behind all of this. And so they're basically using very high-tech strategic World War III drone weapon system for this type of strike. What does that do? When we look at the eclipse, we look at the fact that this eclipse made a direct hit on the Uranus-Neptune conjunction in the Russian Federation chart. We see what? We see increased tensions, high alert, right? Targeting Russian nuclear defenses might lead the Kremlin to believe they are being prepared for a nuclear strike. The focus on their ballistic radar systems would heighten their alertness to a potential nuclear exchange, which is highly concerning. So with an eclipse, if you're like, wow, somebody targeted our systems and there's plausible deniability by the Ukrainians that they did it on their own accord without the assistance from America, which the Russians know that's impossible, right? The tensions are very high now because they realize that America is targeting their first strike, call it first strike alert systems. So this type of VM stations play a critical role in identifying false positive alerts of nuclear attacks. If these stations are targeted and compromised like they were, Russia's ability to discern non-nuclear threats mimicking high-altitude ballistic missile diminished. So in other words, if a missile's fired from Syria and they realize, okay, that missile's fired from Syria, it's here fired from Pakistan, from China, from America, America does this ICBM, and they realize it's not nuclear, right? They could, as a result, because their system is compromised, believe it is nuclear. So this could lead to a dangerous scenario of Russia launching a nuclear response to a non-nuclear strike. So this could be part of this larger false flag operation. Monitoring beyond the borders. So in the ninth house, just so remember, this ninth house is to monitor beyond the borders in mundane astrology. So stations like the Armavir, right, that was struck by Ukraine were used to monitor the ballistic missile activities far beyond Russian airspace, including regions like the Middle East. Striking these stations aimed to essentially blind Russia, preventing them from detecting missile events unrelated to the conflict in Ukraine. And then the strategic messaging by NATO, NATO's sending a very powerful strategic message where NATO believes that by dismantling Russian high-powered radar systems sends a clear message to Russia. Any nuclear threats will be preemptively countered. We're not even going to wait. Any type of nuclear threat you make, we will take the next step. However, this could provoke Russia into launching a nuclear strike without prior warning, escalating the situation. So these are all things that are being played out right now, hidden in plain sight. And by the way, this is the first phase of Major Attack Option 1. Major Attack Option 1 is the counterforce plan that is presented to the president. It gets updated and modified every month, but it is the counterforce plan that's been in place since 1952. So this targets Russia's nuclear forces and military facilities. So what I want to show you now is what they really are up to, because their whole goal is to neutralize Russia's intelligence gathering capability, to neutralize their ability to launch any weapon systems, meaning they could win a strategic war with Russia by disabling their capability of detecting missiles, number one, and using any type of relay or communication systems within their command system would be completely neutralized. So basically, they wouldn't be able to launch any of the weapons that they have in a counterstrike of any type.
To watch the full presentation and more like this on geopolitics, the economy, and world events from an archetypal and mundane astrological perspective, join the Global Transformation Astrology membership. Go to gta.williamstickevers.com. Become a GTA member today.